You're listening to No Early GGs.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to episode 77 of the No Early GGs FPL Draft Podcast. I want to set a scene for you early in this episode. A small minnow, a team full of 7 players only, going up against a tyrant who you may know as Noah. 11 players fielded. David could not pull it out. A sad, sad day. I ended up losing in our podcast host derby this past weekend by 1 point. My 7 players, put up a strong fight, but I think in hindsight I probably should have pushed for having an 8th starter, but it is what it is. And Noah's not here to join me to alter that history in my mind, so he's just going to have to listen to this and refute my points when he gets back next week. He's actually still out scouting FPL gems for next year out in California, I think. So hopefully he gets back here soon for himself, actually, so he can, air his own viewpoint on our match last week. But I am here by myself, and I am going to talk about game week 27 in a similar fashion to how I did last week. Basically go position by position, talk about more specifically defensive rankings, because I feel like those are always useful as you're not really targeting specific players, but rather clean sheet potential as an entire backline and goalkeeper. And I'll also talk about, there are a lot of injuries recently that you might be able to take advantage of, not to speak ill of those that are actually getting injured, but there are a lot this week and this go around, and I'm slightly affected, which is another problem for me to solve in the waiver pool. So I'll speak with one that hits close to home. I guess there are 2 or 3 actually, or 4, maybe 5. We'll go. I didn't plan that. We're going one by one. Nkunku is again red flagged. He's out for an indiscriminate amount of time, I believe, which is very, very sad for Chelsea's hopes of doing anything, and by that I mean winning a game in the Premier League. So we are going to be without him for a while. Solanke missed Bournemouth's FA Cup game on Tuesday, I believe that was, and he was out of the squad completely. He's now yellow flagged. I'm wondering if he's going to miss any of these games that Bournemouth have coming up, which is very sad for people that have prepared for that. Salah still yellow flagged. Darwin also yellow flagged. They have a ton of injuries, as we have seen from the Carabao Cup final that they played, which they still managed to win, sadly. And in addition to that, Ferguson also yellow flagged. I believe Welbeck was also injured. Brighton played against Wolves today. I'm recording this on Wednesday, and Welbeck was on the bench, and we saw Ansu Fati start up top. So very interesting. And to add to that, Mitoma is now out for the season, which is news that I wish they would have released before last game week, because then I could have just dropped him rather than holding him, but he got me 0 points. So very, very sad for Mitoma, but I'm going to have to most likely drop him, and it's going to be very interesting because he's been in my team the entire year. Okay, let's get into some defensive rankings before I go over specific goalies and defenders. For the first spot, this is an easy choice this week. It is Arsenal. They're playing Sheffield United away. Arsenal would be in the top 5 against most teams pretty much, but against the team that I believe is in last place, they're a no-brainer, easy pick, and they're probably picked up, but they're definitely starting. I don't think I even really had to mention that. This game week is full of very tight fixtures, so it's very, very hard to find. There's going to be a very large drop-off here. I believe in my ranking, the second team is Liverpool. They're playing Forest. Forest are not the worst attacking-wise, especially with Awoniyi, Hudson-Odoi, and Alanga playing pretty well, but I do believe Liverpool, who they've always had a strong defense. Most of their injuries are in the attack. I do think that they will be fine with Connor Bradley, Van Dijk, Konate, and Robertson or Tsimikas back there, or Gomez. Next up, we have Bournemouth. I never thought I would rank Bournemouth this high, but there might be some bias here because they do have a great double against Sheffield and Luton the week after as well, so I think that bumps them up a little bit in my mind. They're playing Burnley, but I do think they have a good chance of keeping a clean sheet, at least better than the other teams that I'm going to mention. Next up, we have City against Man U. Again, not the best fixture, but better than others. Uh, West Ham versus Everton. This is mainly just because West Ham, or Everton rather, don't really score goals, and I think players like Emerson or Soufal would be good pickups this week. Just we saw Emerson score last week, and an assist actually, so he gets forward a decent amount. Spurs are next. They're not the strongest defense, but I believe that they have most of their starters back now. Hopefully Udogie is back for me. I would love to have his attacking potential back in my starting lineup. I actually have Everton next in this ranking. I do think out of all the games that might be the highest possibility for a 0-0 that we see. Everton can pretty much keep a clean sheet against anyone. I believe we've seen them keep a clean sheet against Man U and Chelsea this season already, so that is always going to bump them up my defensive rankings, and their defenders are probably available if you have a bunch of tougher fixtures like the teams I'm about to mention. Burnley is actually next. I don't know, Bournemouth, especially if Solanke is not playing. I believe their backup Ünal is also out, or he left their FA Cup match early as well and went to the hospital, so very interested to see how that impacts Bournemouth's ability to score. After that, I have Brighton. They're playing against Fulham, who aren't the worst. We saw them score twice against Man U. Again, there are not very many good picks this week. Likewise with Chelsea and Brentford. I don't know if I really have to mention the rest of the teams because they're playing a bunch of tough fixtures. Newcastle, I think, have the highest expected goals conceded recently, so they are down here as well. Fulham, Aston Villa, Wolves, Luton, Manchester United, Forest, Palace, and Sheffield round out my list of 20. So I would really target those teams I kind of went into a little bit more detail about, but I wouldn't necessarily go haywire dropping a bunch of the teams that I had lower on my rank because they might have better fixtures down the line. I don't know if that really needs to be said. Now, more specifically for Bournemouth, I feel like there are 5 players, it makes it a little murky, of defenders that you could pick up here. Neto, the goalie, goes without saying. If he's not picked up, is probably the next or the best goalie for next game week and one of the best ones for this week. But in terms of defenders, Senesi is probably the one that most people will go for. I think he has the most goals at 3 or 2, but I think he's a yellow card or 2 yellow cards away from suspension, so there's a little bit of risk there. Zabarny and Smith are the other 2 that are pretty nailed down for Bournemouth's defense, and I think those are the next 2 I would go for. But the real curveball here is Kirkej and Kelly at left back. I believe Kirkej had the same amount of shots as Solanke in Bournemouth's last game, which is very interesting, but he is a rotation risk when Kelly's back, who is now yellow flagged. For Liverpool, I mean, Bradley, if he's not picked up, I feel like is the obvious choice. He played basically winger in their FA Cup game today. For West Ham, I mentioned Emerson, and then I just wanted to throw in Doughty, as Luton do have a double next game week, and he is basically a winger as well. In terms of midfielders, I wanted to call out Declan Rice. He has 4 goals and 5 assists. I know Noah and I have debates about center mid, center defensive mids, but he gets forward a lot. I think the biggest space to take advantage of right now is those Brighton midfielders, but I will air some caution out there as they rotate a lot. But I do think Buonanotte and Fati are good pickups if Adingra is already taken, because I think he's their number 1 mid now with Matoma out, after Pascal Gross. Let me rephrase that. Pascal Gross is 1, Matoma's 2, or was 2, Adingra is now 2, and then Fati and Buonanotte I think can be swapped. I do want to mention Ross Barkley for the double. I think I would rank him slightly above Hudson-Odoi. But Hudson-Odoi had 4 shots in Forest's last game, and he always looks dangerous. But Barkley is having a tremendous season and even had 2 assists in Luton's FA Cup fixture against City. Paqueta is also back for West Ham. He is instrumental to their form as we saw them put 4 past What team were they playing? They were playing Brentford. So yeah, he's pretty vital to their play, and I think he should be picked up over pretty much everyone, as he's probably the most vital to a team's attacking potential. Lastly, for Bournemouth, if you really want to get ahead, Tavernier is probably the number one, but I would actually go Ryan Christie for pretty sure starts. They do seem to rotate their wingers a lot, but I would wait for any injury news about Solanke, because I think that will vastly impact their lineup and maybe make Tavernier even more nailed than he already was. But they do have Sinistera, Semenyo, and Kluivert all ready to play wing if needed. So I think Christie's probably the number one midfielder that has a little bit of attacking but is also nailed. For forwards, Semenyo, I just mentioned, is probably the best forward to pick up if he's available and you want a player for the double. We saw came in and score against against West Ham. Sorry, I guess I was right with United, but West Ham United. And I do think he's going to take that spot back from Maupay. Wissa was one of those players I considered picking up for my 8th player, so pretty devastated that I did not do that as he came in and scored a goal. For Luton, there are 2 players, Ogbene and Woodrow, if you want players for their double next week. If Adebayo's still out, I would expect to see Woodrow start again. He started their last 2 games, but I think Ogbene might be a better shout, even though he plays right wing back. And then lastly, Fofana for Burnley has started most of their games. I don't think he scored for a little bit, but as Noah always says, starting forwards are always tough to come by, so you can't really reject them when they come along. I think I would rank Semenyo first, Wissa, and then Fofana, because he's actually up top, and then Ogbene and Woodrow in terms of those forwards. I believe that is going to do it for this episode of the No Early GG's FPL Draft Podcast. And just remember, even if you don't have a full starting 11, Noah will vouch for me. I did not early GG. I was there until the end being annoying in the group chat, so you can do that too. No early GGs.
You're listening to No Early GGs.